Nostrdam is powered by Albi, Yakihona, and NextBlock.
All right, let's have a little chat for 30, 40 minutes about the future of Nostr, looking into the future for the next 10 years. But before we do that, let's give the mic to these three gentlemen to introduce themselves first briefly. So, William.
I'm William Kazarin. I made Damus and Zaps, and I made the first mobile Nostr client that got popular, I guess.
Wout Constant, mostly just a dude, but I got into this because I did a podcast with Jeff, and he's involved with Nostr supposedly. So, and I got inspired to write a book on the thing. So that's what I'm working on, and the Nostr Special Forces Initiative recently. So.
I'm Ian Reese. I'm here from NextBlock, but I also do a podcast with my wife called Flirting with Bitcoin, where it's me teaching her about Bitcoin. She's a Bitcoiner now, but when we started, it was a lot of long episodes. But yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome, thank you. So before going into the future, I thought, why don't we look back at the past 2-3 years since Jeff launched the first bit of Nostr, the first NIPs, the first ideas, and all the things that have been developed ever since in terms of clients, in terms of NIPs. So what are the most important things that have been created the past 2 years?
In terms of NIPs?
Yeah, or just in general, compared to how Jeff started it initially?
Yeah, so when I joined the project, I think it was early 2022, the protocol just was kind of broken. It didn't really work. And I ran into this because I just started posting a lot, and the only client at the time was called Bronley. And basically, just because I was posting 5 notes a day, it would bring down the entire network. Apparently, that was just too many notes. So I'm like, well, this is not good. Let's fix this. So I added one feature to Nostr called the limit on the query. So this just basically says, instead of just pulling every note you can, just pull maybe 5 notes. So this is a very first step. This is my first contribution to Nostr. And just adding that one small feature basically increased the performance of Nostr by 1,000%. And this is the only reason why Damus started working. But this was my first interaction with Nostr. It felt like a very open thing. The fact that I could just go in and add this pretty core features. This is in NIP 01 now. It's the very first NIP. I thought, oh, this is so cool. This is just still early on. I can contribute and make an impact. And yeah, that was the first thing that kind of got me really interested in Nostr. The fact that it was still so early, and anyone can contribute. And I just love that idea. But yeah, so that was a big one, just adding that limit query. And I guess, yeah, other than that, NIP 10 is pretty important, being able to pull down threads and read threads. But yeah, there's these fundamentally core, these core NIPs that most clients probably want to do.
How about Zaps?
Yeah, Zaps is pretty cool, I guess. I don't know. So people always say oh, is Nostr a Bitcoin project? And it's probably my fault because I was working on Lightning, and I was like, I want to bring Lightning into Nostr. And then the minute I did that, it's now people think Nostr is a Bitcoin project, but it's not really. It's Nostr has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It just so happens we have a NIP called Zaps, and we integrate with the Lightning network. But I mean, it's pretty cool. People seem to like it.
Wouter, Ian, do you have a feature that came into Nostr the past 2 years that is really making a difference for you?
Not something specific, I guess, just to give a little bit of context. I think Nostr is an evolving idea from the start. I don't think I know that when Jeff came up with the idea, I don't think he anticipated what it is right now or what the vision is behind it right now. And that's something that evolved over time, and I guess it's still evolving. And we're actively thinking about what it sort of introduces a new paradigm of working and how we build stuff and how we do things on the web. And I guess that's something we're still figuring out. I think what's first called the gossip model, now the outbox model, is I think a good example of this, where we're slowly figuring out what is it we're actually supposed to do. And as a result, we also have to do with a bunch of legacy things that we're not taking into account when building the standard from in first instance, the NIP 01 thing. So it could have been better. It's not perfect, but I guess we'll have to deal with it. It's too late now.
Yeah, it is too late, isn't it?
Yeah, it's too late.
We're all at a conference talking about it. It's too late now. I think that the most interesting feature that has come into Nostr since the jackening is being able to log in with your Nostr like account and like extensions and stuff like that. That was actually what caught my attention in Nostr for various reasons. But the main reason that it caught my attention is because I've been going on this rant for like the last 15 years about Facebook and just all the crazy things that Facebook does and how they just control the social media landscape. And when I saw that, I forget who did it. Maybe it was like Stacker News or somebody like, you can log in with your NIP now or your NSEC. I was like, oh, and then I can go over there and log in over there, and I can go over there and log in over there, and it's no longer like, you posted something we didn't like, and now you can't log into all the sites you used to log into. That was what like caught my attention, and I just started focusing on Nostr as much as I was focusing on Bitcoin. But that one in particular, I think, really changed the game for how does Nostr compete with social media. But in a bigger sense, how does Nostr compete with just big tech in general and their entire business model, which is, we got you. Where are you going?
I think the beauty for Nostr is that as we're all learning about it, we have this moment. It's like, oh, this is much cooler than I thought. Like, wait, we have this compounding network effects that we have in Nostr that we don't have somewhere else. Or wait, we have this opportunity to create algorithms or not, but they're at least optional. So like as we're going to exploring all these new features and also the struggles going into the year of 2034, I thought, why don't we split it up in like a little bit of future of relays, the future of clients. And focusing on the relays first, I was wondering, maybe first for you, William, how is it to run the biggest relay of the world, more or less, just for the audience to...
Like how or why?
Both, but like what comes with it? Like, is it easy?
Yeah.
Just some perspective.
Well, it's easy now. It's only easy because this like genius database engineer, his name is Doug Hoyt. He created like the fastest database ever created. And so it's called Stir Fry, and people don't understand how much of a technical achievement this is what he built, and it's really the only reason why Nostr works today. There was a point, I don't know if anyone remembers, and it's probably around late 2022, where Nostr just kind of stopped working. It's like right when Jack showed up, he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" It's like he brought like 1,000 like people, like tens of. I think I got like 400,000 downloads on Damus like the first week. And like all the relays started dying because they're all built around Postgres and SQLite and things like that. So we have like really, really good tech that runs this stuff. And so like I'm like, okay, I think I went through like, the SQLite relay, the Postgres relay, and finally the Stir Fry relay actually worked. And that was like, okay, whew, I can like calm down for a bit. I can start working on Damus again. Because like at some point I was just trying to keep the server alive. But that is obviously going to run out eventually once we have millions of people, tens of millions of people. One relay is not going to be able to handle it. But, like you're mentioning the outbox model, there's going to be lots of different relays and they're all going to be handling the load in different ways. Like not everyone's going to be on a single relay like that we have now. It's actually kind of my fault. So like Via Jaff's original vision was the outbox model, but I'm like, I'm stupid and I'm like, I want to do something really easy. I'm like, okay, I'll just do a fixed relay pool and just connect to those relays. But like Via Jaff, he's like, what are you doing? This is not what I thought. I'm like, whatever, man. I'm just building a client. It's like a weekend project. Like, give me a break. And then everyone started copying me. And I'm like, oh crap. So,
but then why did you start your own relay if you're building a client?
Yeah.
What is the incentive for you to have a big relay or to have one that's Damus?
The biggest thing is just I want my users to have a reliable experience because the people running the relays were. I just wanted like people who sign up for Damus the first time, they could actually just use the app because if I was relying on third-party relays and they didn't care about performance like I do, then like my users would suffer. When that's not really ideal. That's really the main reason. It's just like why at least I have one that can provide a reliable experience. But eventually, hopefully, once there's more relays and we switch to the outbox model, I can actually eventually just shut down the Damus relay because if I don't need to run it, I don't want to run it. It's cost money, right? So
yeah. So that's like one of the questions I already had before this panel. How do we do this with relays in the future that are going to be costly to run if there's only an incentive for like clients to have one for themselves? So like, how are we going to finance the future of relays and maintaining a decentralized kind of landscape of relays as well?
If you have an answer,
I don't know. I feel like he's teeing me up for something, but I think we actually need to have a business model. And I think a lot of stuff in Nostr is done by people who are very passionate, like Will, and they just sit down like, hey, there's something cool I want to do, and I might do it wrong, or I might need to like just hack some things in to get it to work. But fundamentally, I feel like what Nostr is missing is a business model. There's a couple of apps out there that have like subscription-based business models, or like what is it, Zapstream, which is like stream or pay as you stream. Same thing with Fountain. But I think fundamentally, because a lot of these things started out as a passion project, no one actually sat down and thought about how are we going to pay for this going forward. And now, because of the success of things like Damus and some of the other apps that we're seeing being built, now people are trying to rework that vision and say, okay, how do I make this sustainable? How do I, quote unquote, feed my family doing this work? And that's where I think we're seeing a lot of challenges. My wife and I, we're starting a company called Nextblock that I think will address some of these challenges. I don't want to like jump too much into that because I have a presentation to go through, but I really think it's that most apps are missing a business model.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because like people ask me this question literally every time I show up to a Nostr meetup. It's like, how are we gonna fund the relay? It's like, who's gonna build the roads? It's like the same thing. It's it's like once we build success, like business models, like you said, like we have at Damus, we have the purple subscription, and you can get extra features like translations. And in reality, like the revenue from that subscription is actually covering the relay. The relay is not the biggest cost right now. The biggest cost is like paying employees.
But in this case, you have the Damus relay and the Damus client, and the client is paying for the relay.
Yes.
But is that a sustainable kind of concept for
but
Nostr in 10 years? That every relay is connected to like a client, like necessarily?
There's going to be specific purpose clients that provide some value or some feature to some customer who's going to be willing to pay for it. It's kind of like saying, you're like, oh, how are we going to fund HTTP? It's like people just built businesses on top of the web, and they all kind of interoperate through hyperlinks. Like we're going to do the same thing with Nostr, except the thing that's interoperable is the data itself instead of just links. So I think that's the model going forward. Once we have the Outbox model, people are going to have these businesses. You can sign up for them, subscribe, and they're all the best thing is that they're all going to work together. I think that's the main advantage we have over the web. Is the web, they don't really interoperate with each other. Different websites don't really interoperate. The best they can do is kind of hyperlink to each other, but we can truly provide like synergistic value between our apps because the data is interoperable.
So I'd like to take a step back, because before the question is like, are there business models and how we're going to make money? It's like, is the model even going to work? I'm not sure. I hope it's going to work. So why do we even use relays? We like Fiatjev introduced this notion of relays because he wanted something that works, right? So he didn't do anything peer-to-peer. So that, I guess that goes a little bit to your first question, is like to William, is like, why are you running your relay? Well, because having like a server that does things that at least makes it that it works. But then the other parts, like, well, we want a lot of relays. So we have this specific model in mind. And then there's this tension, right? Because the idea is that we have like these dumb relays and these smart clients. But if you want to make things easy and make them work, it's very tempted to make the relays a little bit smarter. And like if you enter the business case discussion there, it's like maybe even there's a pressure to make the relays a little bit smarter and get a little bit more added value there in order to make it viable to run a relay. So I guess there's hopefully we can figure it out in a way that it works, and that we have very smart clients that do a lot of things, and maybe not all the things. And there's also this notion of DVMs, right? Maybe like outsourcing compute or outsourcing the more complicated things that you don't want to run locally. So we have these relays, we have these clients, and we have this notion of DVMs, and we kind of have to distribute between those things. Like we keep the relays dumb and make the clients very smart, and put the complicated stuff, outsource it into some market of services. In a broad sense, that's the model. And I guess that kind of puts a lot of business model focus on the DVM stuff at first, clients later, and then maybe relays third. But in the model, the idea is that we have a lot of relays, then I guess there's not a lot of pressure in terms of cost on particular relays. So if there's a very well-running business that uses a relay to make it work or make it work better, then it's fine, right? That it covers that cost. And if I can, for me personally, it's very cheap to run a relay for my own stuff and maybe for my friends, and then the cost pressure is very low. So then the problem is basically marginalized. I think it's somewhere in there is your answer.
So if we're looking at business models, then it's very easy to think back, and maybe some of you have seen this presentation from Rebel about like how business model entered the early era of the internet, and we had like surveillance capitalism taking over. Knowing what we know today, how can we create a future for Nostr in 10 years in which we have the most optimal use of this protocol with the values that we want to have in it? Like what things should we not do, like knowing what we know?
Well, I mean, we set it up in a way that kind of takes away the power from people who want to silo. You know, I feel like a lot of capitalism is involved. It involves just kind of like, you know, siloing your users and kind of creating a walled garden so that you have like a better experience for users. But at the protocol level, we've kind of made that really hard just because we made it really easy for data to be transferred to other silos. And like not even like email is considered a pretty decentralized protocol, but it doesn't even really have that feature. Like you can kind of sync email, but you know it's not built into the protocol at the base layer. Like we're even considering putting negentropy, which is like this set reconciliation protocol, into NIP01. I've been talking to Vitor and FiatJav about this because if we just make it even easier to sync data between relays, like then all the relays support it, then it's going to be really, really hard to silo your users. And just the fact that users have a key that sign the data and you can't like companies can't really tamper with that data. It's a signed piece of data. So they have all you can really do is just like host the data, but it's not like a specialty role. So at that point you're like, well, I can't really do much on the relay side, so I might as well just provide value in the client. And this is where I think the client competition between different companies is going to create lots of value for users. So yeah, I think just overall it's a very user-centric protocol, and users are going to benefit just the way that we set it up.
We have to. So where is the market? Right? Where is actually the monetization of the current like the status quo? And it's in the attention market. So we're not paying for the infrastructure, right? You can just make an account in all these platforms for free and go start doing your things and upload your stuff. So you're not paying for the infrastructure. So you're not an active participant in that market. That's paid for by proxy, right? But how is it paid for? It's paid for in the attention market. So, I mean, what you're doing when you're posting stuff online is you're either you're looking for someone or something, or you're actively seeking engagement from other people looking at you, right? So you're seeking attention. And what these platforms are able to do is, because they are the ones that actually facilitate this process, they can now open this market for attention, where they can say, well, if you pay us, we'll force feed stuff to our users. We'll force feed an ad in between the video, or we shove things in their feed. So that's where the actual marketplace right now for the current web is in this attention market. And when taking away these platforms, we're for the most part taking away this ability to monetize. So the monetization for attention has to be like more directly. I mean, either you just subscribe to a feed, or you zap someone if you like something, and then that leaves this whole notion of like who's gonna pay for the infrastructure. I guess that ties a little bit back into what you mentioned earlier, and hopefully we can get somewhat of a market there that's not just on the business to business side, but also like from the net user perspective, that you pay for that you at least pay something for the infrastructure, because otherwise you're still going to be some feudal peasant basically.
I mean, infrastructure is so cheap though. Like you could run my relay on like a $30 a month VPS. Like people kind of I feel like over exaggerate the cost of the infrastructure, especially if in the outbox model when we're all sharing the cost like in a distributed way. I don't know. I'm not too concerned about the infrastructure. It's going to be a commodity, and they're all going to be dumb relays. There's going to be a lot of them. So
it kind of depends on what you're talking about, right? In terms of infrastructure, I mean, the web relies on Cloudflare. So, I mean, that's something. If you talk about stuff other than text, right? The moment you start to talk about videos, for example, it becomes very complicated as well. So I agree when it's just text and simple events. Like I mentioned, then I think a lot of the costs can be very marginal. Especially if we use this outbox model, but there's still a lot of aspects to the web. And broadly, like solving the problems of spam and Sybil and all these nasty, thorny issues that come along with the web. We have to find answers to that. And the current way, the status quo, were actually ways of mitigating those problems, right? And it came with a lot of downsides, and we're trying to redo that right now.
Yeah, so I want to touch on something you said about attention, right? So we all know that social media companies, they fund themselves by selling ads, right? And as you said, well, it's really an attention marketplace, right? They're shoving these ads in your face. So it's not so much that people don't want to participate in that marketplace. They're just not a full participant, right? And so in theory, if we were to acknowledge the fact that these social media companies are actually selling something that they don't own, which is our attention, I think that really like changes the conversation of this attention marketplace that you're talking about. And this is one of the things that I'll talk about in my talk later, but the attention marketplace is how we fund everything in Nostr. And I don't think anyone's really cracked that nut yet, but perhaps NextBlock has, and that's all I'll say until the talk. But the attention marketplace itself is a real thing. And right now the social media companies have monopolized it. And I think Nostr can actually take that power away from them because we actually control what we see on Nostr. There is no algorithm.
And I think like, we're just starting to see this with Zaps and how, value for value. I think once we hit a certain scale with Zaps, like even me, like once I launched Zaps, people like, I think I have over 200,000 Zaps on my Lightning node or something. So totaling probably over a Bitcoin worth of Zaps. And if I'm just like a weird nerd from Canada can get a Bitcoin of Zaps with 200,000 followers, like imagine if you're like 20 million follower, like celebrity, and you have like 50 million people on Nostr. Like that is going to be absolutely insane because there's no middleman. There's no one taking a cut, direct value for value. And I don't think people are ready for a world or don't really understand a world that looks like that. And even in Damus, we have this feature where it's kind of hidden because Apple made us remove it, but whatever. You can still unlock it. Zap.army, go there if you want to unlock Zaps on Damus. It basically, you can send a proportion of your Zap to fund. It's kind of like a little voluntary tax. But you can fund the development of the client. Some clients might even force that to be on if you want to use the client. If they provide a good user experience. And not only that, you can not only fund the client, but you can fund the relays that you're communicating with. So there's so many opportunities with Zaps in terms of just like fixing the monetization issues that and not having to rely on ads and we're just starting to explore that right now.
And just to add and tie it back to the relay thing and the business model for the relay, payments is a good spam prevention model. So even for that, I guess, that doesn't necessarily mean that all the relays will use this method. But at least it's something that it's very logical for particular relays to apply this barrier of entry in terms of payments. Just as a spam prevention measure, and for primary, it's a spam prevention measure, and then secondarily, it's also something that maybe pays for the thing. So,
cool. Let's also talk a bit about the future of those clients. You already mentioned it briefly with Zap splits to the developers. We have been highlighting mainly the social media aspect of Nostr, but I think there's way more that we can explore, especially going into the future. So what kind of applications do already exist, just to give an example to the audience, that brings Nostr to more than just social media? And what is the next big deal?
So some of my kind of the coolest things that I've seen and that people are using Nostr for, one is something called Nostromo. And they're trying to do a market-based system on top of Nostr, kind of similar to RoboSats, but on on an order book that's shared among all these different apps. That's one really cool use case. I think some people are doing coin joins on Nostr. Joinster is one. Zap.stream. At Damus, we've been talking internally about we have Damus Social, but what does Damus Work look like? We have Damus Social, Damus Work, Damus Play. Not many people are exploring what is the Nostr game dev scene look like? Because I used to build games before I worked on Nostr. I love game dev, so I'm I want to see a game where it's the data within the game is on Nostr and you're zapping people within the game. I don't know. There's so many opportunities this is such a generic protocol that you can really build anything, and kind of just plug into this like worldwide network of like the cryptographic social graph. So there's just so many opportunities.
With a lot of compounding network effects, right? That if someone else builds something cool, you as a developer of one specific client can tap into that.
I think it's going to be hard for people in the future. Let's say this snowball keeps going and going. It's going to be hard to not start a new app on Nostr because you just get millions of users for free. And they can just plug their key into your client, and it's just like they have their existing social graph. So this is just going to be so attractive to developers that it's going to be very hard not to just build on Nostr because you just have a network effect from the start.
Yeah, I think speaking on like your game dev thing, I think what do they call them, like achievements and stuff like that. That's like a very easy, low-hanging fruit that I think probably if and when Sony or Microsoft get around to integrating Nostr, you'll just start seeing posts from like these game platforms like, oh, I unlocked this achievement or whatever, or Steam, right? That's like a very easy low-hanging fruit that I think a lot of the current game dev world can like integrate at. But I also think, similar to Will's point, that we haven't actually seen, I think I talk about this a lot on our podcast, like we haven't actually seen the full breadth of developers come to Nostr, right? Like Bitcoin is still struggling to get developers, right? Nostr is just a subset, unfortunately, of the Bitcoin world to a lesser extent. And so we're all fighting for the same resources. But once this becomes obvious to more people, like Nostr is something you need, then you'll see the people that weren't paying attention to it apply their creativity, apply their problem space with Nostr and say, how do I solve my problem with Bitcoin and Nostr? And I think the possibilities are endless. But I think achievements is like that's probably happening in the next 2 years. Somebody's, if not,
in the same
DVD
vein,
doing that.
In the same vein of like just like customer loyalty programs. Let's say you ran like Nike account on your account. You can just like, and if someone was the first one to order your shoe, then you can just give them a badge. Like we have the badge spec already, and it was literally that was one of the use cases we're thinking of. And I was talking to someone I think at like the football, or not football, but like basketball. I was talking to someone there, like they're always trying to do cutting edge stuff with like, NFT cards and stuff. And now they're looking into maybe doing Nostr stuff. So I think once we start getting some of these larger brands and organizations onto Nostr, I think that'd be super interesting.
So I think for a large part, we can actually just replicate what we did on the web. And that's solving a hard problem, which is indexing, basically. So there are a lot of these examples, right? And interestingly, there are like international examples and a lot of Dutch-specific ones. So for example, like I think Booking.com is actually Dutch. But what they're doing is like, okay, we have this space, and people want to seek have like relevant information. So what we're going to do the hard work, and we're going to go through all the crap and filter out what's actually useful. And now we have this nice database that we can present to our users and implement services on top of this. And the thing is with Nostr, that's fine, right? It's fine if somebody takes the effort into indexing all the great chefs and create a recipe application that put a lot of work into gathering all these chefs together. Because the moment you enter that space, maybe you pay for it, right? Now you have access, you have what the actual MPubs of these chefs are, and you can just follow these chefs, and you don't actually need that platform anymore. So what this platform, like quote unquote platform, actually is just a starting off point for you to get into contact in some particular space, be it hotels or be it cooking or be it whatever, right? That someone took the effort of indexing it for you. And this party has its biases and its preferences, etc. But it doesn't matter because it just allows you as an entry point into the space that you can then subsequently start to explore by yourself. You don't need that party anymore. But they did actually provide a valuable service to you.
I have a really good one. I just remembered. Has anyone heard of the record label called Monster Cat? No one? All right, we got one. I used to work at Monster Cat, and I was the CTO. And one of the biggest issues that I saw was like all of our contracts were like siloed internally, and basically that gave us leverage over our artists in the sense that if someone sampled a piece of their track, it was really hard for them to get attribution and for them to get paid. But if all the contract splits were on Nostr and then any label could reference them, then artists could actually get paid way more. And then there would be a lot more cross-pollination between like stems and things like that. So just in the record industry, I think that would be huge to have Nostr more involved.
I want to tack on to what you were saying about the I just had a brain fart. The example I wanted to give for what you were saying was Craigslist, right? So, when I'm trying to explain Nostr to people and I'm trying to explain Bitcoin to people, I always use the example of Craigslist, which is, Craigslist is this site that no work was put into the UI. It was probably, to your point, like a very simple version of indexing. And then over the course of 20 years, every Silicon Valley company just went into Craigslist, picked one of those categories and said, I'm going to try to build a business off one of these categories. And to this day, they're still doing it. Like, how many rental apartment apps can we make, right? But all they're doing fundamentally is taking a Craigslist category and making a company out of it. And so I think that, to your point, like do what we did on the web, I think that's what's going to happen, right? I think people are just going to bring their lived experience of what problems they see on the internet. They're going to look at Nostr and say, oh, I can do it differently now, like your chef example, and say, oh, what if I built my business differently? It's the same outcome, right? I want to group a bunch of chefs and teach people about cooking or something like that, but I can do it differently with Nostr. And I think that's how, for lack of a better term, the normies of the world are going to actually find out and discover Nostr. It's not because someone told them get on Nostr. It's because the Nostr app is actually better than the existing version of that on the internet.
Cool. So I think we have a couple more minutes. So I want to do maybe 4 or 5 minutes of adversarial thinking. Like, what do we really need to fix in Nostr? What tools do we really need for it to be successful in 10 years? And then maybe we can do a couple of questions. The first thing that comes to mind that I know has been ongoing for a while, and Pablo has worked on this, is key rotation. But then we have hardware signers, we have multi-sigs. Is this really such a big thing, or are there other crucial things that we need to fix?
Key rotation is a really hard problem, and I don't think there's an easy way to do it at the protocol level. But obviously, we have something called NSEC Bunker, which is a way for you to do remote signing. So one thing we just added to Damus, which I'm going to talk about in my talk, in the future of Damus, is we added push notifications, and that immediately allows us to become a remote signer. All you have to do is if you just send out a signing request from any app, and then we will receive it as a push notification on your phone, and then your phone can sign for it and reply to it. So this should make it way more comfortable for people to use their NSEC if they trust Damus with their NSEC to use it in different clients. I guess for me, it's I practice safe NSECs, and I don't put my NSEC into any random Nostr client. And that's the joke we use. No. So yeah, I think that will because the best part of Nostr is using other apps, but if you're too afraid to put your key in anywhere, then it's not a good experience. So this should help a lot with that adoption.
More ideas of things we need to fix?
Well, I mean, the public-private keys are a bitch, right? I mean, they're a terrible idea. They suck, it's nice because Bitcoin is paving a path for a large part of this. I mean, we actually have the hardware wallet stuff developed because of Bitcoin. There's a lot of experience in how to manage this stuff, but it's still terrible. And I don't know. Hopefully, we'll find a way. There's a large, I guess, intergenerational component to this of being comfortable in using this stuff. That's just going to take a lot of time, right? We're going to have our own generation of boomers that going to have a hard time using this, and then younger generations for whom it's more intuitive. So I that's not even on a 10-year scale. That's on a longer scale, if you ask me. For the other parts, what do we need? I guess. I started out with, I think it's an evolving idea, and we're now trying to figure out the model, and then hopefully the model works. And I guess that's something for that next 10 years. I think that's something that needs the most time and effort. And I think how it's going to play out, it's like herding cats. So it's crazy. Everybody's doing stuff on their own, and then every so often, Fiat Jeff drops a bomb. And tries to undermine things and scuffle up things a bit, and then hopefully that generates enough discussion for people to adjust their behavior in terms of development, and that's how we progress, I guess.
I have one more question, unless you have something to add for the.
Oh, I was going to just add to the private key concept. To your point, I think it's generational and it's going to take a while to get everyone used to this. I onboarded one of my wife's aunts the other day, and it was challenging to say the least, right? But what I also think is going to happen in the future is Nostr-specific hardware, right? I think we're going to have Nostr-specific hardware, and let's go as far as to say as graphene, right? Operating system Nostr, where you log into the phone with your NSEC. Your NSEC is in your phone. Maybe the phone itself can switch between NSECs. And now it's like you do that action once and you never do it again. Somebody will do that. I won't do that, but somebody's going to do that.
I'm kind of working. I'm kind of working on that. So I'm going to talk about this in my presentation at 4:30, I think it is.
Well, we should chat.
But basically, it's like the idea is think of like Chrome, right? Like Chrome is a browser for the web. Like what does a browser for Nostr look like? And a browser for Nostr should manage your key privately, and then you have a bunch of apps for that browser that don't have access to the private key. We have something similar to that in terms of browser extensions, but it's like they're kind of complicated. But if we just had a dedicated operating system, you think of browser as kind of like an operating system that manages, that just keeps that boundary there. I think that's probably going to be the future.
You're going to just hijack Chrome OS?
No.
No.
All right, final question. I was just thinking, we mentioned some about the Zap splits and funding. And then the analogy with Bitcoin is like we had this subsidy from the beginning. It's halving every 4 years. In Nostr, we don't have it in the protocol, but we have like all the subsidies from OpenSats and other organizations, nonprofits that give back to the ecosystem or just simply donate. Over time, of course, we'll also develop more business models, as you mentioned. How is this going to be like a problem, or is this something that will solve itself naturally over time, or should we be wary of something?
This is just a commerce and an economic problem. If you just have lots of businesses running their business on Nostr, people are buying and selling things on the marketplace, people are zapping people, and everyone's doing this, then it's going to form a zap economy, I call it. And if we just maintain a healthy zap economy, then I don't see there being an issue. I think that's kind of the future that we're heading. And we need more businesses, more business models, and just more people to be zapping.
All right, thank you. I think we can do 1-2 questions. Yeah, maybe come here with the mic so everyone can hear your question.
Hi. I know you mentioned quite a lot about the business side also, but still I have a query. Maybe I'm very new to Nostr. So how do you plan to see Nostr sustaining itself economically? Like if it's a decentralized service and if everything is free, how do you pay for developers, maintenance cost, or servers? And isn't there a inherent contradiction, expecting free services in a capitalist framework? I know you mentioned about the business model is still missing. You mentioned about the attention marketplace, but still I'm trying to wrap my head around it and trying to understand. I understand it's a protocol and then the main application is built on it like in a span of 5 to 10 years. But from a business perspective, can you be more specific and, answer this question?
The microphone is off, by the way, that they're holding. That's 40. Oh, okay.
I just see it as like, look at email. I know, and you did kind of briefly mention this, that, but I don't see as, you don't monetize email. Email is just like a thing that's going to facilitate the communication between nodes and servers. It's going to be up to the businesses to build products on top of that, like Gmail and Yahoo and, Outlook. And they're going to try to, get users to join their system. And, the protocol is we're all going to be able to talk to each other. But that's not where no one's investing into internet infrastructure except maybe ISPs. But I just don't look at it in that way. It's interesting that it is brought up a lot, like how are we going to, fund the future of Nostr? But it's like no one really talks about that on the internet because there's just so many businesses on the internet. It's kind of curious, how does it? I guess ISPs make their money from subscribers, but
Yeah.
We also have this notion of cloud computing, like Amazon is big and Google's big and a lot of stuff is happening there. Google even has their own cables, and they have a lot of large servers. So I guess there is a lot of hardware out there that is being invested in making a lot of this web running.
Yeah, and just like maybe hosting relays for businesses could just be a business model in itself, right? People pay for that service, just like Cloudflare.
Yeah, I would point to what is it? Nostr Wine. That's a relay, and they charge a subscription. I paid for it. A lot of people paid for it, and we're actually in talks with them to use them as the relay provider for Nextblock. So if Nextblock can build a business that can afford to pay other people who are providing services in the community or the economy of Nostr, then that particular company, Nostr Wine, doesn't have to, if what I'm thinking works out, they don't have to go out and get every person to pay them anymore. They just have to be a usable, functioning relay, and other businesses will fund them by paying them to run their relays, right? Like I'm sure Will would love to just pay somebody to run the relay if they ran it the way that he ran it, and it just was like a line item expense, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I had someone who knew how to spin up like 100 stir-fry relays in an Anycast setup, which is like, I feel like that's where I'm gonna head to, that's pretty complicated, right? That's kind of like Cloudflare. Cloudflare is kind of doing that. They have this Anycast setup. They have thousands of servers. They can handle any amount of load. Like I'm probably gonna need that if I have like millions of users on Damus. So yeah, I would totally pay for that, especially if like I have lots of subscribers and stuff. So
yeah, so like that's how I think it's going to work out. It's going to be top level apps and businesses paying infrastructure providers for the various things they need. Another good example is Nostr Build, right? So you can't upload. Well, there's other ones, but Nostr Build is the big one that everyone uploads media to. And I've been talking to those guys as well, and they're just like, oh yeah, this is so much easier. Like just one customer, you're gonna put all this load on us. Great. Now our business model can actually make more sense than the integrating with individual clients and hoping that someone integrates you and not knowing what that revenue stream is going to be. Larger entities can provide consistent revenue stream to these people, and then they can fund and run their businesses that keep the infrastructure going.
I saw one more question over there.
Yet neither of those suggestions or approaches, by my opinion, creates value for Nostr itself. Those are just other businesses conducting their business. So Nostr just becomes an exploited tool for the community in that sense. And my question is, in regards of the SATs and the Zap economy that was great before Apple had a objection to it. Where was the actual initial value and entry point of money flowing in to justify that? Because now Apple is charging 30% to regurgitate the economy there, which I don't believe is actually contributing that much to Nostr. So how is the basic understanding of to where that economy is supposed to come from without competing with other markets that already exist and are very stable and working?
it's a really interesting problem because in some sense, Zaps have worked really, they're kind of like a feature of cyberspace. Like it hasn't really had a lot of adoption in like brick and mortar industries, like maybe in like the city I'm in, but I think Zaps are really going to take off in cyberspace. And unfortunately, Apple controls a large proportion of the people who are interacting with apps in cyberspace. And so they think they can take 30% of all digital transactions on the internet, which is absolutely insane. So that they are a huge a risk and a huge barrier for adoption of Zaps. And I know I ran into that explicitly. I suspect they find it a threat to their entire business model, which I thought was completely silly because they're like $1 trillion corporation, and like the Zaps at the time were like a few $100 flying around the network. So maybe they're more afraid than, I don't know. It just seems kind of silly to me.
There is actually a campaign that's been running on Nostr since August that demonstrate creating value by revenuing the binary time that we all share there to intelligence. Have you guys seen that campaign?
I don't know what that's referring to.
I'm unaware of that campaign.
Okay, it could be interesting to discuss because it solves the very problem that you gentlemen mentioned by lacking a source of value to put into the huge revenue machine that Nostr and Nostr economics are.
So what I would say is, let's talk after my presentation.
Certainly.
Only after, though. Only after.
Certainly.
Do you have time for more questions, Edward, or that's it? Are there more questions? Anyone?
I'll just add to that with that one comment, which is I think people should start applying prices to things. there's this culture within Zaps to just like ask for any amount, but there's no anchoring bias there. And I think if more people started to anchor prices onto their posts, like one thing I've been thinking about adding to Damus is where you can set a bunch of pre-configured Zap amounts, and you can only zap those amounts on that for that user. And I think that would improve the amount of zaps flowing through the network, because some people are zapping like 21 sats, which is fine, but like it's kind of like low impact, right? That's why I have the default zap amount to 1,000, which I think no one ever uses. But yeah, people should be zapping larger amounts. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
All right, I think that's it. Let's wrap up. Thanks, William, Wouter, Ein, for your insights. Thanks, everyone.
Nostrdom is an initiative promoting the Nostr protocol by organizing one-day conferences alongside Bitcoin events, running booths, creating online content, and hosting meetups. Our goal is to connect developers and users to drive Nostr adoption.